Joanna Gaines collapsed on set and then disappeared. No press, no warning, just silence. What happened next changed everything. It was just another routine morning on set. The crew for Mini Rennie, Magnolia Network's latest renovation series, had gathered for a tightly scheduled day of shooting. Joanna Gaines, America's beloved home design icon, was preparing to film a transformation reveal for the living room sequence. As the director counted down, 5, 4, 3, something unexpected happened. Joanna staggered slightly, bracing herself on the arm of a sofa. And then, before anyone could react, she collapsed. Production halted instantly. Witnesses on set described the moment as surreal. For a woman who'd carried a decade of network productions on her shoulders, whose composure had never wavered under pressure, seeing her fall to the floor sent a ripple of panic through the team. Medical personnel on standby responded within seconds, but the atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't a minor trip or dehydration. Something was seriously wrong. Joanna was rushed to a nearby medical facility in Waco, Texas, where initial tests revealed concerning irregularities. According to individuals close to the production, doctors flagged markers consistent with immune system distress, an internal alarm bell that triggered further, more invasive diagnostics. By the end of that day, whispers among staff hinted at a potential autoimmune disorder. The specific term, systemic lupus erythematosus, was quietly passed between insiders, though no official diagnosis was made public. Filming was quietly suspended. No press release followed, no social media post addressed the incident. But for those paying attention, Joanna's sudden absence from scheduled media appearances was impossible to ignore. What had been planned as just another episode of Mini Rennie turned into the beginning of something far more serious. A pause not just in filming, but perhaps in an entire era of the Gaines story. Within hours of Joanna's medical emergency, Chip Gaines vanished from public view. A man once known for his high-octane energy, bouncing between renovation sites, network pitches, and media appearances, went completely silent. By the following afternoon, meetings at Magnolia headquarters were canceled without explanation. 2 days later, Chip officially turned down what insiders say was a multi-million-dollar deal with HGTV, a proposed fixer-upper reboot designed to take the brand international. Executives had lined up a bold new direction. Chip would helm episodes across cities outside Waco, expanding the empire globally. Contracts were in motion, negotiations were underway, and then, abruptly, it all stopped. According to a source familiar with the discussions, Chip didn't request more time or a restructured agreement. He simply declined. No counteroffers, no publicity, just a quiet refusal. That move raised eyebrows across the television industry, but for those close to the Gaines family, it made perfect sense. Joanna's condition, though still unconfirmed publicly, was described behind closed doors as serious enough to require indefinite rest. And for Chip, business could wait. Family came first. Shortly after, Magnolia released a brief statement. Joanna is taking time to care for herself and her family. We thank everyone for their support. But the words said less than what followed. Press appearances vanished from the couple's calendar. Scheduled interviews, including a high-profile segment with The Today Show, were quietly removed. Magnolia's social accounts went dark on Joanna's end. Fans noticed Chip's Instagram, once a source of behind-the-scenes banter and construction bloopers, had shifted to grayscale photos and cryptic captions. Then came the post that changed everything. A single image of Chip holding Joanna's hand. The caption read, "The light is always there, but sometimes it needs a little protection to keep shining." Within 48 hours, it racked up millions of shares. Chip had said nothing, but through silence, he made one thing clear. He was stepping off the stage, not to retreat, but to stand beside the person who needed him most. For weeks after Joanna's collapse, the public waited for clarity. None came. Magnolia's official channels offered only minimal updates. No medical statement, no press conference. Just a short note buried on their website: Joanna is taking time to care for herself and her family. Those 13 words, devoid of detail, did little to quiet the rising tide of concern. Then came the leak. A behind-the-scenes video, reportedly from Minnie Rainey's internal footage, surfaced online. It showed Joanna being helped into a car by an assistant. Her head was bowed, her frame noticeably thinner. She said nothing, but her condition spoke volumes. The clip spread fast, first across fan forums, then major entertainment blogs. Overnight, speculation exploded. Was this a chronic illness, a mental health crisis, a burnout from years of nonstop filming and brand building? With no official explanation, social media filled in the blanks. Tabloid headlines grew bolder. Hashtags surged. Hashtag Where is Joanna? Hashtag Pray for Joe. TikTok creators posted frame-by-frame analyses of Joanna's last few public appearances, pointing to subtle signs: how often she touched her side, her pauses between lines, the dark circles under her eyes. Still, Magnolia stayed quiet. Even Chip's Instagram, which had briefly sparked hope, returned to cryptic imagery. A coffee mug, a faded blueprint with the word "on hold." No dates, no tags, just the faint outline of a family pausing without asking for attention. Behind the scenes, staff at Magnolia continued their work, but the absence was impossible to ignore. Joanna's name was quietly removed from new content credits. She was no longer listed as an executive producer on upcoming episodes. Her design notes stopped arriving. Internally, it felt like watching someone slowly disappear from the room without ever saying goodbye. Yet, just when fans began to fear the worst, someone unexpected stepped into the frame. Not a producer, not a network executive, but a teenage girl with her mother's quiet strength. With no statements, no appearances, and no visible presence from Joanna Gaines, the public took matters into their own hands. Within days of the leaked video, online forums lit up. Reddit threads dissected Joanna's final public photos, comparing posture, facial tone, and even clothing choice. Amateur medical opinions circulated, with users citing symptoms that aligned with autoimmune flare-ups. Others noted a consistent pattern: dark clothing, longer sleeves, subtle discomfort. TikTok sleuths stitched together timelines, arguing that Joanna had shown signs of exhaustion as far back as late 2024. The hashtag #PrayForJoe trended for nearly a week. But it wasn't just fans analyzing her health. It was the silence itself that fueled the frenzy. To many, the absence of denial felt like confirmation. No, Joanna is fine. No reassurance from Magnolia beyond a generic message. That vacuum became a breeding ground for conspiracies. Some speculated she was stepping back for good. Others went darker, suggesting hidden diagnoses or private treatment centers. A few even raised questions about Magnolia's future, wondering if the empire was beginning to fracture without its creative soul. All the while, viewership for older Fixer-Upper episodes surged. Fans weren't just watching, they were searching, looking for clues, hoping for familiarity, trying to read into smiles, pauses, gestures, anything that might explain what was unfolding behind closed doors. In a rare, quiet gesture that only amplified concern, Chip posted a single image: Joanna's silhouette, sitting in a sunlit garden, facing away from the camera. The caption read only, "Still here." No one knew what that meant, but the message was clear. Joanna was still fighting, and Chip was still by her side. In April 2025, Magnolia Network quietly uploaded a teaser for a brand new design series, Minnie Rainey. The footage was everything fans had come to expect: soft lighting, airy interiors, signature rustic modern touches. And at the center of it all was Joanna Gaines. Calm, smiling, guiding homeowners through layout changes and fabric swatches. But one thing was impossible to miss. Chip was gone. Not in the background, not on voiceover, not even mentioned. The announcement blindsided viewers. For over a decade, Chip and Joanna had been a package deal. Their chemistry, the builder's chaos paired with the designer's poise, had made them one of the most iconic duos in television. So where was he now? The network gave no explanation. Insiders speculated that Mini Rennie had been developed months earlier, possibly before Joanna's health issues took center stage. But the timing of its release raised eyebrows. Was this an intentional pivot, a solo comeback, or simply a pre-scheduled rollout Magnolia chose not to cancel? Media outlets picked up the scent. Headlines read, "Joanna goes solo. Is the Gaines duo no more?" And "Behind Magnolia's quiet divide." Commentators debated everything from creative differences to marriage troubles, though no evidence ever supported such claims. Still, speculation thrived in the vacuum left by Magnolia's silence. What fans didn't see, what no camera captured, was the reality. Mini Rennie wasn't a bold reinvention. It was a commitment Joanna had tried to fulfill before her condition worsened. And while her presence in the teaser was real, much of the show's editing and post-production had been completed by others, guided remotely through brief calls and scribbled notes. In fact, Chip's absence wasn't a step away from Joanna, it was a step closer. He had quietly declined producer credits, refused the camera, and instead chose to focus on something far more personal, keeping the family and the woman behind the brand grounded. But even as they stepped back, the past began to resurface, and not everything in Magnolia's history was built on polished shiplap and warm lighting. As Joanna's health crisis unfolded and Chip retreated from the limelight, the spotlight didn't vanish. It shifted. With Mini Rennie's unusual rollout and the Gaines' absence from press circuits, attention quickly turned toward Magnolia's past. And soon, controversies that had long simmered beneath the surface began to boil again. First came the resurfacing of a 2018 violation that had once made brief headlines and then faded. Magnolia Homes had been fined $40,000 by the Environmental Protection Agency for improper handling of lead paint during home renovations. At the time, the Gaineses had cooperated fully, paid the fine, and issued a statement reaffirming their commitment to safety. But now, with Joanna's condition in question, critics questioned whether years of exposure to harsh construction environments could have taken a toll on her health. Then came the renewed conversation around diversity, or the lack of it. In 2017, Magnolia had come under fire for never featuring LGBTQ couples on Fixer Upper. While no official policy excluding anyone was ever proven, media outlets pointed out the absence. The couple remained silent on the matter, choosing not to engage. But in 2021, the Gaines family made a political donation to a school board candidate opposing critical race theory, reigniting criticism over their social and cultural positions. Those discussions faded once again, until now. In the void left by Joanna's disappearance, Magnolia's critics reappeared. Headlines questioned whether the brand was as wholesome as it presented themselves. Some labeled their silence as strategic. Others called it calculated. For fans, it was a test of loyalty. For skeptics, it was an opportunity to reframe a decade-long narrative. And then, as if the tension weren't already high enough, Magnolia Network was hit with an internal scandal. The show Homework, once heralded as a bold new entry into the network's programming, faced allegations from former clients claiming poor renovation practices. Magnolia initially pulled the show, then quietly reinstated it after a review. The damage, however, was done. Through it all, Chip and Joanna remained quiet. No rebuttals, no lawsuits, no press tours. Just stillness. Yet behind that stillness, something else was happening. An unexpected figure was rising to hold the family legacy. As Joanna faded from the spotlight and Chip quietly withdrew from public duties, a surprising figure emerged from within the Gaines household. Ella, their eldest daughter, just 17 years old. She wasn't a television personality. She had no formal title, no publicist, no media training. But inside Magnolia's Waco offices, staff quickly began to notice something remarkable. Ella wasn't just present, she was participating. According to multiple Magnolia employees, Ella had begun interning casually months before her mother's health deteriorated. What started as a behind-the-scenes learning opportunity became something else entirely. She began shadowing design meetings, scribbling notes on mood boards, asking precise questions about font spacing in the Magnolia Journal. At first, she was simply observing. Then, she started organizing. By the time Joanna stepped away completely, Ella had become a silent conduit. Internal sources say she relayed feedback from her mother during brief phone calls when Joanna had the energy to speak. She flagged urgent emails, coordinated post-production feedback for Mini Rini, and reviewed social media posts to ensure they stayed true to her mother's tone. She didn't ask for permission, she didn't ask for credit, she simply filled the void. But Ella wasn't alone. Her younger siblings, Duke, Drake, MEK, and Crew, each found quiet roles to play. Magnolia staff recalled emotional moments. Crew, the youngest, asking, "How's mommy today?" each time Chip picked him up from preschool. MEK took charge of meal prep, sticking nutritionist-approved menus on the fridge in pink marker. Duke began attending internal office meetings with Chip, taking notes for Joanna to review when she felt strong enough. No one assigned these roles. They weren't coached. They simply stepped forward. And in a moment captured quietly by a warehouse security camera, all 5 children sat together, checking promotional materials, reviewing product labels, cross-referencing launch timelines. Joanna, watching the feed from home, reportedly burst into tears. It was the first time she'd cried since her diagnosis. Not from pain, but from knowing she wasn't alone. In the absence of press tours and headline deals, the Gaines family began operating on something more powerful than strategy: instinct, love, unity. And it wasn't just a temporary patch. Because as Joanna stayed hidden from cameras, the legacy of Magnolia was already being reshaped by the very people she'd once carried through the spotlight. Inside Magnolia's headquarters, the pace had slowed. Not by choice, but by necessity. After the public saw less and less of Joanna Gaines, internal changes began rippling across the empire she and Chip had built from the ground up. According to company insiders, strategy meetings moved online, creative reviews were postponed, and production calendars were rewritten from scratch. For the first time in years, Magnolia's release schedule didn't look booked, it looked uncertain. In April 2025, Chip Gaines issued an internal announcement. All personal filming activities, his included, would be suspended until at least the end of the year. He formally withdrew from all active executive producer roles. The message was clear: Magnolia would go on, but not as before. Projects already in pre-production were handed off to Blind NIL, Chip's post-production support company. Magnolia staff, known for executing with tight deadlines and polished visuals, were now operating under a more fluid, more fragile tempo. One executive described the shift as less network, more family studio. Meanwhile, fans noticed changes too. Joanna's name vanished from production credits. Her signature didn't appear in Magnolia Journal Spring Edition. And Magnolia's social channels, once filled with behind-the-scenes banter and kitchen table shots, began focusing more on brand partners than the couple who had made it all matter. Still, the silence wasn't total. On May 1st, Magnolia released a 2-minute video. No background music, no dramatic edits, just Chip and Joanna sitting in their backyard. The light was soft, the camera barely moved. Joanna, in a quiet voice, finally spoke. "I'm facing some health challenges. It's not easy to talk about, but I know I'm not alone." Chip, sitting beside her, looked straight ahead. "We're learning to slow down, and I'll be here until Joe is ready to come back. The video didn't give specifics. It didn't need to. The emotion was unfiltered, the intent unmistakable. They weren't ending anything, but they were pausing it, together. In that moment, fans understood something deeper than a diagnosis. The Gaineses were no longer racing to build. They were holding on to what they'd built and to each other. The video was only 2 minutes long, but for fans of Chip and Joanna Gaines, it spoke volumes. There was no network logo, no product placement, no dramatic background music. Just two familiar faces seated close together in the quiet of their backyard. Joanna looked thinner, her voice lower than viewers remembered, but her gaze remained steady. Chip sat beside her, his expression a mixture of strength and fatigue. "I'm facing some health challenges," Joanna began. "It's not easy to talk about, but I know I'm not alone." She didn't name the condition. There was no diagnosis mentioned, but there didn't need to be. Her vulnerability, so raw, so unfiltered, said what press releases and blog posts never could. And then Chip added 6 words that landed like a soft but solid anchor. "We're learning to slow down." In a culture that often demands speed, output, and visibility, especially from public figures, this wasn't just a health update. It was a declaration. The Gaineses, who had spent a decade transforming homes, hosting shows, launching product lines, and running a media empire, were now choosing something far less glamorous: stillness. In the weeks that followed, Magnolia's pace remained quiet. New shows aired without Joanna's name in the credits. Company meetings were shorter, more private. The Waco silos, once bustling with press events, now held smaller gatherings, intimate, local, human. And yet something shifted among fans too. Rather than fading away, support intensified. Posts flooded in from families who'd faced similar journeys: cancer, autoimmune illness, burnout, loss. Magnolia's inbox became a place of reflection, not promotion. Chip and Joanna had always designed spaces for others. Now, their story was creating space for grace, for patience, for healing. But there was no press tour to capitalize on the moment, no fast-track book deal, no special episode in the works. They weren't selling anything. They were just being, quietly, steadily, together. And while the future of Magnolia remained unclear, one thing had become certain. The Gaineses were no longer chasing timelines. They were choosing them. There was no press advisory, no camera crew, no polished PR campaign. On a quiet morning in late summer 2025, Joanna Gaines walked through the gates of Magnolia Market for the first time in over 3 months. Dressed in a thick coat and cap, she moved slowly, her figure visibly slimmer, but her eyes still carried that unmistakable clarity. What greeted her wasn't a stage, but something far more intimate. A small gathering had been arranged inside the compound, just family, close friends, and longtime team members. It was called Welcome Home, Mom, a surprise organized by Ella. Booths had been set up around the courtyard, featuring prints of Joanna's designs, snapshots of family dinners, and candid photos taken during her absence. Unedited, unstaged, real. As Joanna entered, the room erupted in applause. And for the first time in months, she smiled, fully, freely. Her youngest son, Crew, rushed to her side, wrapped his arms around her leg, and whispered something that made her laugh. For a fleeting moment, the woman once at the center of a media empire looked like just a mother, relieved, overwhelmed, and home. She didn't make a speech. She didn't announce a comeback. Instead, she quietly walked from booth to booth, adjusting product placements, smoothing out folded areas, and running her hand gently across table corners, old habits returning like muscle memory. That day marked something important, not a return to power, but a return to purpose. Joanna wouldn't go back to her previous pace. Instead, she began participating from the background. Short phone calls with the design team, scribbled feedback in the margins of layout drafts, occasional notes slipped into team Slack threads. She also began journaling her experience, not for the press, but for herself. Eventually, Chip encouraged her to turn those notes into something more. And so, a book project quietly began under Magnolia Books, focused not on renovation, but on recovery. Meanwhile, Chip maintained operations at arm's length. Strategy meetings were now remote. Executives had more autonomy, with guidance trickling in through short memos, not loud directives. It wasn't a handoff, it was a recalibration. And perhaps most telling of all, Joanna, once touted by media as the woman who does it all, no longer tried to live up to that title. She accepted her limits, she embraced rest, and she let her family, for the first time, carry parts of the load she had always shouldered alone. No press headlines could